So I'm Veronica Holt, and this video is for EDU 583 Linguistics at Georgetown College. And this is Miss Knight, and she's one of the teachers of the student that I did my project on for this class. The purpose of this video is to provide recommendations for the mainstream teachers. So we're gonna, for purposes of keeping the student's privacy, we're gonna call the student Natalie. Okay. I refer to the student as Natalie. And the first thing I wanted to do is to go over her access scores. Okay. The access test is, and you know about this, the access test measures the proficiency, English proficiency of students in 4 domains, and that's listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Natalie, the scale actually is from 1 to 6, so 6 is the highest. Natalie got a composite score of 2.9 on her last access test, and her individual domain results were 3.1 for listening. Speaking, she got a 1.9, 2.9 in reading, and 3.3 in writing. So for her proficiency level of 2.9, she is between the beginning and developing. Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds right. When we get the scores, WIDA provides the descriptors, the can-do descriptors, which are really nice to have because it can tell us what the student can do at each level in the 4 domains. And I like this because it focuses on what they can do rather than pointing out what they're deficient on, what they can't do. So at her level in reading, and we'll start with listening is the first one. Listening, she got a 3.1. That's a developing level. And there's a list here of the things she can do. A couple of things is that she can match ideas, the main idea of familiar text, and read aloud to visuals. She can also categorize content based on examples from oral direction. Mm-hmm. For speaking, she got 1.9. That's in the entering. And speaking, I feel like it's always kind of the hardest one for ELLs. But so it wasn't quite at the beginning level. It was in between entering and 2.9. That's developing. And she can use context clues. Mm-hmm. She can make predictions based on illustrated text, and she can identify topic, sentence, main idea, and details in paragraphs. Mm-hmm. So that's all that she's able to do. And then in writing, she got 3.3, and that's closer to a developing level. So for that, she can produce short paragraphs with main ideas and some details. And she can compare and contrast information, events, and characters, and there's more to the list of the things that she can do, but those are some of the things. Okay, so looking at the test scores, the access scores is just one way to assess where the student is. I think one other thing is very important is to know the student's background. Mm-hmm. Okay. And a big area is, their language, about their language. Mm-hmm. So for Natalie, her native language, home language is Spanish. So she speaks that at home. And she also has many friends that speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are many differences between English and Spanish, and some similarities as well. But so in Spanish, the alphabet has 27 letters. Mm-hmm. And it has one more than us, and that's the letter ñ that we don't have. In Spanish, there's a 1-to-1 correspondence between sounds, and there are 5 vowels, but they only have short vowels, not long vowels. So that's one thing that when newcomers come, yes, they struggle with that. They don't have the concept of having the 2 sounds of the vowels. So. Another thing is that the H in Spanish is silent, and the the J is the letter that makes our English H sound. So sometimes when spelling and things, they can get confused with that. As in the word house, for example, they would pronounce it because it has the 2 vowels together, and they have a one-to-one correspondence, and then the H is silent, they will pronounce it O-se. Each vowel is pronounced, so there's no like silent letters at the end. The only letter that's silent is the H. Also, another confusing thing about vowels is the I in Spanish is always pronounced as a long E in English. So when they're reading, they would say the word it as in eat, which that would change the meaning for us.
Completely.
Yes, completely. So that's also kind of an area that they might struggle. Another big difference is that nouns are assigned gender in Spanish, as they're not in English, but and with the gender, also the articles, they have the feminine, the masculine articles also for singular and plural words. Mm-hmm. So we just use the, they say la casa, like the house, that's a feminine word, or el perro, the dog, that's a masculine. Okay, so and one other thing that I thought it was interesting is that in Spanish you don't have words don't ever start with the sound, the S sound. So when they're learning things like even if they're reading the word like state or stable or the name Steve, they insert an E sound, a short E sound for us. So they'll say estate, Esteven, estable, even if they're see that it's
just the S,
the S, but that's something that's ingrained in their brains as they've grown up with Spanish. In Spanish syntax, one of the main differences is that the adjective comes before the noun. So that's something also to point out. In Spanish, you'd say, we here would say the White House. You'd say the house white.
Yeah.
So that's something very different. Even though there are all these differences, we still want to encourage Natalie to keep up with her native language. Mm-hmm. We want her to keep reading in Spanish because research has shown that when they still develop their home language, they're able to transfer the knowledge to English.
And she's a strong reader
in Spanish.
Yeah,
so she's been able to be more successful as others that wouldn't have that strong base. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I have analyzed a speaking sample and a writing sample that she provided. And then we're gonna use that to come up with recommendations for her. So before I go on to her levels, I wanted to also show you that speaking and the WIDA also offers performance definitions to assess speaking and writing. And so we're going to go with those to assess her speaking and writing samples. There are 3 different areas to assess. One is discourse and dimension, which is the linguistic complexity of the language. The other one is sentence dimension, or language forms and conventions. And then the third one is word or phrase dimension, which is the vocabulary usage. So after analyzing her speaking sample, she scored a level 4 in expanding. It's up here. So at level 4, she can say short and expanded in some complex sentences. And then she can organize expressions of ideas with emerging cohesion characteristic of particular content areas. So she says some short sentences like she was talking in the sample about her cousin. Okay. And she says she's in school, she's in 9th grade. And she also talked about her school experience. She said, I like this school. But also she talked in longer sentences when she's talking about her home life with her mom. She said, I just like to spend time with my family and my friends and then go to my house. My mom makes me do my homework, and then she teaches me how to make food, make tortillas, and sometimes I help her make salad. And actually the way she said is, she says she teach me how to make tortillas. So, still developing that, either the tense or the third person agreement with verb agreement. But that was,
More
comprehensible.
complex, though.
Yes, that was more complex, and that didn't really take away from the meaning. So that was in discourse dimension. And in sentence formation, excuse me, she scored a 3 at developing, and 3, the level, she can say simple and compound grammatical structures with occasional variation and sentence patterns across content areas. So she shows some, grammatical structure variation, and she made some mistakes, like just pointed out, and verb tense, or and she also said, when I first come on 6th grade, I didn't know anybody. So in the same sentence, she says, when I first come, but then she said, I didn't know anybody. Yeah. So that's still not like the consistency, but she's getting there. Let's see. And then in the word phrase dimension, there was the vocabulary usage. So that was the one that it was a low, where she got a level 2, and that's emerging. And it says under that, just general content words and expression, social and instructional words and expression across content area. So she's able to use some social and instructional words and expressions. So like, and that comes with learning more, developing that comes from learning more academic vocabulary and just having more experiences, opportunities for her to communicate orally. Okay, so that was, and then how about, she had a couple of pronunciation errors, but they didn't take away from the meaning. So she, for example, she pronounced the C and nice as an F. So she said knife, and also the word outside, she said, I like to play outside. She said outside. So that was for her speaking. So the recommendations for speaking, we'll learn in classes that people have this innate ability to learn language and to form like certain rules without even realizing. And then we do this through social interactions. So the recommendation would be to allow for more opportunities to engage in meaningful conversation and speaking opportunities in the classroom setting. This can be done through collaborative groups, and working in collaborative groups and allows her to, be with other students who are native speakers or other EL students who are more advanced. Yes. Okay, so research shows that with adequate exposure, children can acquire a second language. So that's what we want to make sure that she's a social person. She does like to, interact, communicate. So that's something she will enjoy. Okay, so the key to accomplish this is through comprehensible input. So when we're talking to Natalie as teachers, we try to use every way that we can, like have her understand what we're saying in class through simplifying the language, through using charts or gestures or additional examples. So as long as it's comprehensible to her.
Yeah.
Okay. And also the most important thing that we learn is that all those assignments, interactions, they need to be meaningful, they need to be authentic, excuse me, and then they need to be relatable activities. For that's the best way for them to learn. It has to connect to her interests and her passions. Okay, so excuse me. There are 6 categories that educators should follow to guide students in developing writing pieces. So we're going to move on to the writing. And for her writing was her writing sample was about, it was an informational piece, and she had to come up with evidence from the text to support to support a
question
that. Yes. So in the 6 categories that we use is ideas and purpose is the first one. And that's a very important one because in writing, then the main purpose is to communicate meaning, right? So that's the one that we need to focus on. And then organization is the second one. Cohesion, language richness, sentence grammar, and that one will leave kind of at the end because that's not that's something we can be done after all the ideas have been developed.
It doesn't take away from the meaning.
Right, if it doesn't, exactly. And because there's really not much use if the grammar is perfect but the meaning hasn't been communicated. And then the last one is vocabulary. So Natalie's writing sample, she shows good organization, and then we looked at it together.
Yeah.
She showed good organization, and she had an overall good sentence structure as well, and she communicated her ideas that were clear, and then she used evidence from the text as well.
Yes.
So one thing that I noticed is that she didn't have a very strong closing sentence.
Yeah.
That would tie it all together. But that would come more with practice and doing some of these things that I'm going to talk about. And another area was cohesion, and that comes with that. She didn't use a lot of transition words, so that's one thing to look at. One way to help her improve in this area is to support her development and to support in her development in other areas of writing other than cohesion is through teacher student conferences to collaborate and to share feedback. The teacher can provide feedback to student. The student can ask questions. These conferences shouldn't be seen as an assessment but rather as a way to learn for both of the teacher and the student. Natalie and her teachers also to learn. The teacher learns what she's struggling with and provide feedback, and then Natalie can learn from that. And another way to help Natalie is to review with her model texts in different genres. So that's the best way to go over, point out different ways that each genre is written in. Teaching her about genres and how it's written, it doesn't really take away from her creativity. It just gives her more options. Examples and exactly, more options and for her writing. The more she knows, the more options she will have. It is not meant to take away from their creativity or expression. And she can also do that in groups, and that's like a good way also. If they have a writing assignment, they can do that in groups as well, and she can learn from others. We learned that writing is a social activity, and we don't always see it that way because a lot of times we focus on grammar drills, and we teach it separately, reading and writing separately. But when we interact everything, when we incorporate everything together, actually they learn it better. And other recommendations for writing are word frames or sentence starters. Sometimes they don't know how to go about starting something in a text, and just giving them that starting point, that they can, it makes it a lot easier. And then little by little, we just shift the responsibility to Natalie to take over more of her writing. Okay, so again, with writing as with speaking, we want to make sure that the topics are authentic, that something that she is going to be interested in, and not disconnected to her interest or to real life situations. As she progresses in her development of writing, she's going to get better in her grammar. Grammar is going to improve. but that shouldn't be the first focus. And then another important thing, especially for ELs, is to make sure to let them know that it's okay to make mistakes, because that's how we learn. And sometimes, a lot of times, they're hesitant about trying writing or speaking because they are afraid to make mistakes. But it's important to let them know that that's how we learn, and to use that as something positive rather than bring them down
and stifle their wanting to write.
Yeah. So those are the recommendations. If you wanted to talk about any of these or have any questions on them.
With the authentic writing, I think a lot of times teachers struggle with that because they feel like they have to tell kids specific things to write about. How would you maybe encourage ways to incorporate some more, like getting the EL kids more authentic writing?
I would present several topics and more options rather than just assign one thing that they may or may not be interested in. With just through natural conversation with them, actually, those topics can come up. They can come up with their own prompt and their own topics, something that relates to them. And one example that we had learned about in class is about a teacher who the students came up with the idea, or they saw a problem at the library that they didn't have books in different languages. So they went and wrote books. Simple books. Yes. And so they learned a lot through that. At the end, they celebrated their activity by celebrating their culture, because they wrote in a couple of different languages. Yes, in groups, and that was a big project, and other teachers were involved in it. Also, they involved the families.
And that gets the social part in there that with the writing we forget about.
Yeah, and also inviting the parents to participate, that also included them, made them feel like they're also valued and they're part of their students' education as well. So that was celebrating their culture and their involvement, and
that's a good tip.
So anyway, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.